That's part of the show too. Everybody expects it, so yeah.
Yeah. My only warning to you is that as I have aged, my brain isn't as good as it used to be. So
That goes with all of us. We're in that middle age when you start deteriorating in bodily functions and psychologically and everything. So yeah.
So Chris, I'll tell you a quick story as we're coming on. Before Leonard passed, about a year and a half before, I spent 9 months trying to get him on the show. Leonard Lakofka, and he came on. Then he came on more and more. And as we went on, he would just hop on in the middle of a show.
Yeah, he just popped in and so, he was on, what was it, like 45?
40 shows. He was on 40 plus shows,
yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. He came in and said what he liked.
And then he just popped right off. So trust me, it's all good. So whatever happens, if you don't have a memory of something, it's no worries.
No, it happens to us all the time. And it was so funny with Len LaCoffee. He came in and someone asked a question and his standard answer was nope. And that was it.
Well, I never had the chance to meet him.
No, I never met him in real life. It was so close several times, but the pandemic came. I was supposed to go out and visit him, and then pandemic hit. And I didn't want to risk it, so for his sake more than mine. So yeah, so then unfortunately he passed before this kind of blew over. So
yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame. It happened. He was actually on the show the night before he passed.
Yeah, he was into the last. Yep. We didn't know he was that bad, but he said he wasn't feeling well, and so on. And then we got the message he passed.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, North Shore, you got it, man. We're gonna be cranking this up here.
Yep.
I'll blow through the sponsors quick. Trust me on this. I'll blow through
longer
quickly.
And more of them, and
Controller games. We'll have them on for 10 seconds, right? Yeah. Hopefully Chuck's doing okay. I haven't talked to him in a little bit.
Yeah.
Chuck,
two friends in India that is doing.
Hell yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right, Dave.
My friend Brian Galvin, Games Florida, he died unexpectedly just a month or two ago.
Okay, yeah, so you don't get any cat invasion.
Oh, yeah, I got it cracked
like
a little bit, but yeah, you got the cat invasion. You know that, right?
Yeah, the ones that hop up and.
Rabbit, he's
Okay, yeah, I have a 19-year-old doggy here, and she's not much. Yeah, she's when I'm standing up at my desk now, but when I sit down, Minnie's been on the show so often, so she's like a character on the show now. Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, Anna, the arena of this, Mike Saxton printed it up for us.
Yeah, I've seen like 2/3 or half of it.
Yeah, he got it. It's done. So he's just gonna ship
it's
it.
Done
and,
now.
It'll be shipping this week, and we decided, you were in the meeting, we decided we're going to do that grand melee for Virtual Greyhawk Con, which would be really cool to have it in there.
That's awesome. Yeah, it'll be a worthy successor of the tournament.
Yeah, the joust that we had during Con.
Yeah, they had a joust, a whole arena tournament and built up in miniatures. It was fabulous. Yeah.
Next thing, Chris, I know you did a lot of chainmail back in the day. Our style of 1E2E play is very almost board game like.
Yeah, and you used the chainmail rules for the joust too.
The
Oh, a
original
version of it,
chainmail from
Dragon,
Dragon
it was-
10 or whatever.
Ah, yeah,
19,
with Dragon
whatever
10.
it was.
Yes.
Yeah, we
Dragon 10. So,
chainmail
yeah.
ones, yeah. This is the one that we got all printed up already. It's this. Now Bill's got to, of course, paint it up and fix it up, but yeah. So that'll be exciting.
You love minis.
What's that?
I said I do love minis.
Yeah, that's
then you
awesome
have
to hear.
Yeah, then you have to watch one of
Oh, we'll have to
There's
get
a whole
get
basement
Chris in
full
the
of
game with
miniatures and
minis,
stuff.
right?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, I love minis. Love
Come
them.
to pack some plug.
I'm blessed, Chris,
Yep.
that Reaper Miniature sponsors me too. So,
Nice.
and two 3D print companies and Miniature Building Authority as well, and they're all great with terrain assistance and all. And we have a lot of just that's our style. You know, we use miniatures rules for movement. 1 inch is, you know, like 120 feet for D&D outdoors is 12 inches. You know, it's kind of you know, we always loved it. So, all right, everyone, we're almost there.
Okay.
We're almost there to the start here. So,
So many sponsors.
so many, man. It's been a
Yeah.
it's as Anna's been with me partnering
Something
and
years.
working.
Yeah.
Yeah, since for about over 2 full years, and
Yeah.
it's gone very well in the last 2 years. A lot. So, Chris, Big Mac, Chris promises chainmail's better than Gary Goddess's chainmail changed my mind. That was Big Mac from the Piazza.
Yeah,
So,
David is awesome. Yep.
I should mention it's pronounced Pramas.
I'm sorry.
My name is pronounced Pramas.
Pramas, my
Pramas.
apologies. See, I have a
Yes.
weird South Jersey accent, Chris. I apologize.
Oh, no, everyone does it.
Pramas. Okay.
Yep. Good
Pramas.
to know.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, everyone says, are you from Philly? You got that weird Philly accent. I'm like, yeah, I'm outside Philadelphia. You got it.
Well, I'm
Definitely.
from the East Coast too. So.
Hey,
Pramas.
yeah, I'm Swede. Moved to California 10 years ago, so that's where my accent comes from. Yep.
Yeah, you did, Steven. You already learned something. And Chris, there's going to be a live chat going on Twitch on my channel. I can relay that to you. Don't worry about that. I made the questions and all. Got always have a great audience.
Oh yeah, the audience is fantastic.
What's up, Christoph? Good to see you.
Yep.
Already learned some things tonight, Christoph. We're not even live yet. Well, we're
Yeah.
live, but we're not even like, you know. So,
Started yet.
wonderful, wonderful publications.
Yep.
Definitely. And it's 7:29. We always come on 1 minute before we're supposed to. It's a little bit of some wonderful stuff to discuss tonight. And the unbelievably fantastic contributions of Chris Pramas, correct?
Correct.
Chris, welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to Gabbin. Thank you so very much for hanging out with us tonight. As always with me, I have Anna Meyer, and the ever mysterious Tim's going to hop on because when he found out that I had the owner of Green Ronin coming on, he's like, can I come on? I have to ask him a ton of questions. Like, sure. No problem. Thank you for coming on tonight.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So, when did you decide I love D&D and I love being a gamer? Like, were you like 10, 12, 15, 20?
I was 10.
Okay.
So to age myself, that was 1979. And I discovered D&D and Lord of the Rings the same year. And those two things literally changed my life.
Excellent.
So, yep.
Wow. Yep.
We're right in the same time frame.
Yeah, exactly.
My campaign started in 1980 that I'm still playing now in Greyhawk, and I started really in '78 with the Holmes Basics set. So we're right in the same time frame.
Yeah, we
That's very
found
cool.
out I was dragged into a game the winter between 79 and 80 as well. So, and then, I
Fantastic.
never heard of Tolkien and anything before, and that changed my life too. So, yeah.
Yeah, I actually have to give my mother eternal credit because,
Wow.
you know, in an era of satanic panic and all that stuff, you know, she saw an article in like a Sunday magazine about this game that these crazy college kids were playing. And she was like, oh, that sounds creative. And you like fantasy, like maybe you should check that out. And so we went to Eric Fuchs, which was a game store in Salem, Massachusetts.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
What was your first purchase?
Oh, I think we
And
lost
bought
it.
the
Okay.
D&D white box.
Oh, the white box. Wow. Yeah,
Oh.
we lost you for a second. You
Sorry, did I
zipped
cut
out.
off there?
Yeah,
Oh, you're back again.
Yeah, you backed out. You backed out
Okay.
again there. So,
Yeah.
the white box. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I couldn't actually make much sense of the white box because it was written for wargamers and people who are already in, the hobby. And I was a 10-year-old. So basically, I went from the white box. We then got the Holmes basic set, which made a lot more sense, and then jumped into AD&D and got the player's handbook and stuff. So
Cool. Yep.
yeah.
So, did you jump from that to Holmes Basic, or did you go to AD&D from that point on?
I got Holmes Basic next, but then very quickly jumped into AD&D because Holmes Basic was 3 levels. So
and then you had to get the other one. So so it was more like an introductory set. I remember that too. And then we also, when we got Player's Handbook and DMG, we were Monster Manual. It was like that opened the floodgates, so to speak.
And also, being a young smartass, I was like, I'm advanced. I need the advanced rules.
Those, first edition still has a place in my heart. I play a 1E, 2E hybrid going back all those years, and I've incorporated some 3E in, but I just love what they did with it, and it's expandable. When did you get the urge to say, you know what, I can write some content, I can make up some things, I can do this? Was it a Dragon, or was it like, some...
I think I was about 12 or so, and I had gotten a Dragon magazine subscription, and that was sort of my entry point into the kind of the wider game industry, where I could like see ads for other games and read reviews and, that sort of stuff. And I remember thinking hey, maybe I could write articles for Dragon magazine and I could make like $100 and that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first Dragon you got? Was it in the 60s, in that era? 60, 62?
60.
Oh, I don't remember which issue it was. It was something like number 48 or something like
48
that.
has the big dragon on with a castle. I
think that was an older issue that I picked up, but I think my subscription started a little bit later than that.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
So when did you get an article in Dragon magazine back in those days? Was that how it started with publishing?
No, not in those days. I eventually, it's about a year before I actually got hired at Wizards, I became briefly a staff reviewer for Dragon.
So that was your foot in the business, so to speak, or?
No, my foot into the business was doing freelance work on other RPGs.
Okay.
So, the first game that I wrote for professionally, I'd done some semi-pro work before this, but my first professional credits were for a game called Underground, designed by Ray Winninger, who is the current king of D&D. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I did freelance work for that in 1993 on 2 books, Underground Player's Handbook and the Underground Companion. Those both came out in 94, and that was the start of my freelance career.
Okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
What was the base on that game? Was it was it a D&D knockoff, or was it completely different?
Oh, no. It was like a dystopian superhero game.
Oh. Nice.
Yeah. It's this it's kind of wild because there's all this stuff in the game that's meant to be like totally outrageous, like Rush Limbaugh was vice president and things like that.
So it's like Watchmen.
Yeah. And when you look at it now, you're like, reality has gotten closer to this satire, in the ensuing 25 years. Or
yeah, it's interesting how some of the things have aged. Really, yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the idea of that game was that there's like an alien spaceship that crashes, and technology is pulled out of it that allows essentially the creation of superheroes, and they're used as super soldiers by corporations to fight these like proxy wars all over the world.
Sounds like The Boys.
Yeah, but it's like more like corporate sponsorship and all this and that.
Oh
and,
my gosh.
But it
Wow.
also drives people freaking crazy. So to try to control that, they would put people in these like essentially virtual reality tanks, and they would have this whole storyline play out inspired by comic books with very much like black and white morality and all this sort of stuff to ease them into using their powers and, you know, make it so hopefully they wouldn't get crazy. But then when they would be, you know, put back into the real world, they would have all these sort of ideals of, you know, justice and freedom, and then they'd be confronted by working for these, you know, soulless corporations and corrupt politicians, and, you know, it was like a massive disconnect. So anyway,
Yeah.
That's a good. Hey, that's cool.
yeah.
I mean, I imagine was it a book or box set? Well, back
It was a
then,
book. Yeah.
man, imagine how much
It
one
was
of
actually
those is
one of
worth.
the earliest color role-playing games. Was it's really beautifully put together. Maria Cabardo, who was the art director, she went on to a long career at DC Comics, actually, and you know she got all kinds of great artists and things to work on that.
Wow.
So,
Very
yeah,
cool.
it's a cool game.
So we're talking 90s here. We're talking early 90s for that, and then there's that leap from that point onward to WotC, or is there something else in between?
Yeah, so I started a freelance career, and I wrote for a bunch of games in the middle 90s. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Over the Edge, Star Trek Next Generation, a bunch of things. And I started my own company. It was the precursor to Green Ronin, and that was called simply Ronin Publishing. And we bought this game called The Whispering Vault that I had done freelance work for, and the company that's published it was you know, circling the drain basically. And so we bought the game and started to publish that. And you know, it was my first company, and we didn't know what we were doing. So you know, I learned a lot, but that company did not succeed, let's just say. But I was able to take the experience and use that in my freelance resume to get hired in at Wizards, which I did in March of 1998. That's when I went to go work for Wizards.
Okay. So right in that era, right at the end of 2E, pre 3E.
Yes,
correct. Had they moved to Seattle, and so it was under Wizards then?
It was under Wizards, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So I grew up on the East Coast. I was born in the Boston area. Then I lived in New York City for nearly a decade. And then I had moved out to Seattle in like August of 97. And I tried to just do freelance writing for a living, which was a really bad idea because you never know when you're going to get paid. So I was doing things like paying for my rent with a credit card on certain months, and it was a bad scene. But part of the move, you know, I had hoped that I might be able to score a job in the Seattle area working at a game company. And there was an opening at Wizards, and the fact that I was already in Seattle was a plus in my favor. So I got hired and worked at Wizards for 4 years.
Yeah.
So I tried. I probably didn't do a good job of your publications, putting them in chronological order, but there are publications that stick with me as all-time greats. And I've always said 3 of my all-time greats were the following. And number 1's the Free City Greyhawk box set. 2 is, I count them together, and that's Eye of the Evil and the Marklands. And then 3rd is this one. Okay. What a wonderful publication. And just to show you my usable copy, how much I've used it. It's fallen yet. Okay. So and we had Sean on, and we had Sean and Bruce Cordell on a while back, and you know, he said that you were vital with this. So, and there you go.
Yeah, so thank you so much for that gem.
Was
it's
this
for
the
us
first
Greyhawk lovers? Was
this the first main publication you had your name on for WotC for D&D?
No, the first published thing I did was The Guide to Hell.
Oh, okay. Okay, I have them out of order
cool
then.
One. Yep.
Yes. All right. Let's start there then. Guide to Hell. So, a little tidbit about the Guide to Hell, everyone. There is Greyhawk content in it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. Page 17. of the Guide to Hell, L'Ordre de la Croix Rose Veritas.
Yeah.
Okay. It is a monastery of St. Cuthbert, basically. Yeah, and it's very cool, very well put together. And what do you remember from it, Chris?
Well, so the funny thing was that what I was hired in at Wizards to do was to work on a crossover between D&D and Magic the Gathering.
Wow.
Yeah. And this was, I think, the third attempt at Wizards to do something with Magic and role-playing. And there was basically like 2 attempts before the TSR acquisition.
Yeah, but we have to... Oh, sorry. Yeah, just want to say, we have to remember the viewers who are younger or not, but that Magic was exploding at the time compared to D&D.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Magic,
so that was good, bad business reason to want to do that, so to speak. So.
Yes. When Magic came out in 1993, it changed the entire fabric of the game industry.
I hate to do this.
And actually led to many of the problems that TSR suffered, which is why it ended up being bought by Wizards. So,
yeah.
So I was brought in to do world design on that. We had a team, like Jonathan Tweet was doing the rules design, John Ratliff was the editor, and Jesper Meerfors, who was the original Magic art director, was supposed to be the art director. So we had this whole little team to do that. And then basically, the thing to understand about Wizards at that time is that it was sort of like the Holy Roman Empire. It was like technically like one entity, but really, it was a bunch of competing fiefdoms.
Mm-hmm.
And
Like-
so...
Like Apple or was.
So
between the
you
Mac
were
and the
competing
Apple
for
II.
for the attention of the higher gods up there for
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, like the Magic team was really uninterested in this project, and they kept pitching up objections to the whole concept of it. And they were not sticking because Peter Atkinson really wanted to do it because he was, of course, a huge old D&D fan and so on. And then finally they were like, well, isn't it dumb to do this, for 2nd edition when we're already working on 3rd edition? We should wait and do this for 3rd edition. And, that argument like stuck. And so within just a few months of me being hired, then that whole project was canceled.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But they didn't fire you, thankfully.
No,
they
thankfully they did not fire me. So then I was assigned Guide to Hell. And the idea of Guide to Hell was basically that during the the 90s at TSR, all the planar content had been done under the Planescape brand name. And what they had discovered was that a lot of D&D players just tuned it out entirely. They were like, oh, I don't play Planescape. That's not for me. And so the idea of Guide to Hell was to do a mainline like core D&D book that was planar, that was like, no, hey, like any D&D player, like you can use this. You don't need to know any weird cants. You don't need to know the Lady of Pain, whatever.
Yeah, with the factions and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just cool planar contents.
That's.
Yeah. Now the trouble though was that essentially, like, I had to do a whole bunch of research, and I was having to essentially like represent a bunch of material that had appeared in other places, and people who were super into Planescape didn't feel like there was enough new content in it. And it was hard to say to them, well, I mean, this isn't exactly for you, really.
That's tricky.
Yeah, it was tricky. I tried to add some new things to it. I came up with this whole sort of background cosmology for Asmodeus, that subsequent D&D has 100% ignored. In fact, I had to present it as just like essentially a deniable idea because there were people from the old Planescape team who were like very much opposed to the whole thing that I did. So it was presented as like, well, here's this potential backstory for Asmodeus. Maybe it's true,
Yeah, but Yeah, but there's a lot of things that changed between yesterday. I read the White Plume Mountain, and then I read Return to White Plume Mountain, and it's interesting. In the first one, the mountain is 1,000 yards across and 800 feet tall, a volcano, and then in the second one, it's like 10 miles and 8,000 feet tall, and it's interesting that they specify it, and then the one that do the Return, that realized it was so low that so I realized when I'm going to map it, I'm going to make it even bigger. So, but so it's interesting. Even when they do the research, they change things a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Now the funny thing is, when I was doing that book, there was an idea of a character in Colin McComb's book who was unnamed, and so I took the idea and I gave the character a name and a few paragraphs of background information, and it was this character named Zariel. Who was involved, involved in the first layer, and then like I'd more or less forgot about that character, and like last year, somebody on Twitter was like, "Hey, Chris, did you create this Zariel character? Because she's like the main villain in Descent from Avernus," and I was like, "What?" So like I had to go look, and I wasn't even sure because this was like 2 or 3 paragraphs that I wrote in 1998. So I had to go look it up, and yes, like I it's my character, and they she was on the cover of that new D&D book, and I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sometimes, like, one line is enough. I know one line is enough for a Greyhawk cannoneer to find and go, well, it's there,
Yeah, when you do D&D archaeology and something in some obscure little module somewhere, and then that comes from there, and
Well, the great thing about the L'Ordre de la Croix Rose Veritas, it's 3 whole pages, everyone. So it's Saint Cuthbert, lore, Friandi Voluna. What was why Greyhawk?
Well, I like it.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's why I bought the module
reason.
back then. It was like, oh, there's Greyhawk is even mentioned. It was like, yes, get it right away.
I when I got the original Greyhawk folio, and back at a time where there were barely anything that you would describe as a campaign setting in game. So it was essentially my first D&D setting. So yeah, I just had a fondness for it, and part of working at Wizards was that there was like frequently these reorgs where people would be shuffled around and put into different groups and all this and that. I don't remember exactly when this was, but it was while I was still writing D&D stuff. We had one of these reorgs, and everyone got to sort of put in like what team they were most interested in working on. At the time, like I really wanted to be involved in the creation of new like intellectual properties, So I was like, yeah, if we're going to do anything like actually new, I would like to be involved with that. And then when they finished the reorg, my boss was like, well, we could accommodate almost everyone's wishes except yours. So you're going to go on to the Greyhawk Ravenloft Planescape team. And I was like, well, okay, like I like those things. But yeah, it was not exactly what I had hoped for at the time. But then I was on the Greyhawk team with Sean and Harold Johnson and people like that.
Yeah.
Was Bruce Cordell too? Because it was in the black bordered area. I know a lot of your books have the generic black borders that can fit into any campaign in that era.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think Bruce was in that group.
Okay.
Bruce sensibly always tried to stay at the core of D&D because I think he understood that there'd always be work on the core of D&D.
Okay. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, The Guide to Hell is a really intriguing book, and it's if you can find a copy of it out there, is that available on drive-through? I'm not sure, everyone, on that question.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. I think I picked up a PDF copy as well.
Cool.
Of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm assuming then this is second because we have Apocalypse Stone and we have Vortex of Madness as well, and then we have Slavers. So I'm assuming this one's the next one.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
This is 2000, I think, and
1999.
okay.
Yeah. And I think it's
Yeah, I wrote it in my opinion.
yeah. Slavers is also a very interesting product because it's both a setting description and a source book and an adventure. There's so much source material for Greyhawk in general, and
Yeah.
not only an adventure. So that kind of makes it one of these kind of great source books as well as an adventure. So yeah.
Yeah, and I like doing that sort of stuff. I like delving into histories and whatever. So, like all the Cult of the Earth Dragon stuff, that was me. And
I was just going to say that is such
okay.
an intriguing. So now we need
Awesome.
to. Can you please tell us more about
Yes.
the Earth Dragon and the background about that?
Yeah, the Earth Dragon is so iconic now, and
Yeah.
there's so much supposition on: is it a dragon? Is it an evil Earth elemental
Is
it
spirit?
Tharizdun? Is
Yeah.
it?
Or is it-
It's not. No, it's not Tharizdun.
Okay.
I mean, the idea, or my idea anyway, of the Earth Dragon, was that it was basically just like what you might consider like a local spirit that sort of predated the formal pantheons and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Just like a spirit of that
So the
area.
old animistic
Yes,
religion kind of, yeah.
who essentially just stuck around, and extended its area of influence and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a thread from the older modules that I felt I could pick up on and expand.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, was your idea Kellen Lakos? That was you too, placing it in the Pomage, development of a lot of the new slavers. Because there's some. My favorite is the a guy Unjin, who is the fallen paladin of Mayheen that collects things.
Oh yeah.
Was that you on that one? Because that guy is completely like twisted. I mean, he's
I don't quite remember.
Okay.
I mean, essentially, if you look at the book, like Sean wrote the first half and I wrote the second half.
all right, so then it would be you then. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a great. There's a half ogre, a priest of Beltar. There's a evil halfling. Great
that
stuff.
half ogre. I originally gave that half ogre an extremely obscene name, and Sean Reynolds was like,
No.
"Do you know what that means?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I totally do. I just thought it'd be a good."
So it went to
Well,
Abe instead.
It got scrapped.
Yeah. And he's like, "Yeah, we can't put that in the book." I'm like, "Okay, I guess that's fair."
Can you give us a hint what it was?
Not really.
Okay, then it must have been a good name. Yep, must have been a really good name.
I would be amiss if I did not ask this. Carlos Lacing would kill me. Are you responsible for the ultimately crazily evil development of Marquesa?
I think so.
Oh my!
Ooh, Carlos would.
Oh my!
Yeah.
All right, so they
Yep,
take
see?
Marquesa as a character in the original A series Slavers and turn her into Mengele, basically.
Yeah.
Real cool. Yeah.
But worse.
Yeah.
One of the most
Worthy
evil
villain.
characters there is in all of Greyhawk. So if you could lay claim to that, Chris, that is wonderful because
Yep.
Carlos did 3 old modules on it afterwards. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always have to caveat things with, "Hey, it was the '90s, and I don't remember everything 100%, but I think so."
Wow.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
cool. Yep.
And her consort that roams around with her, Devon, who has a rebuilt face. I mean, it's just wonderful writing on
I did some evil shit in that.
and that's what makes it so great.
In Apocalypse Stone, I did a whole thing where you're confronted with a bunch of flesh golems, and it turns out that this villain has gone to find all the family members of each player character,
And turn them into
slaughtered them, and sewn each family up into one flesh golem. And people were like, "Jesus Christ, that's really fucked up."
It's so messed up. I love it. Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah.
So a parting thought on Slavers. It's part of my campaign, and stuff goes from Greyhawk to Harby all over the place to this day on it. it's left a mark on me, and I just want to say thank you.
Oh yeah,
Is that your crowning? You think this is your best publication you did out for WotC in the day, or is there one you hold dear to you?
Well, I mean, it was such a great opportunity because I love the original Slave Lords modules.
Right.
So that was really, the chance that I had to, I think, kind of add to that legacy. So
Yeah.
that was a really cool opportunity. And so, I'm definitely proud of that, and was, pleased that the Greyhawk community embraced it.
Oh yeah, it's one of these favorite ones that I've never heard anything say bad about it,
No.
and I love it. It's one of these great ones, both for the the source material that was plenty in it. So and then the adventure as well. So
yeah. I mean, the other things that I did all had problems of one sort or another.
Yeah.
Like Vortex of Madness was not designed to be an adventure.
Here it is.
It was designed to be part of the series that was like city sites, castle sites.
Okay.
It was supposed to be planar sites, and that's how I designed it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the fact, it was decided for some reason that an adventure would sell better, and so somebody else went in and tried to stitch it together to make an adventure out of it, but you can tell.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of disappointing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because it says for high-level heroes on it, which and then it says another planar perils, so they kind of try to skirt both. It appears.
Yeah.
Did not know that about it. That it was.
A few people do, because I mean, one of the whole things about working on D&D in the era that I did is that the late second edition era is one that is largely forgotten. Like there was a lot of work that happened at Wizards after the TSR acquisition, but before third edition came out. And when people do histories of D&D, they just sort of skip. They just kind of skip it, and that was where all my contributions to D&D are in the era.
Yeah, but
Chris.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting, especially when in the Greyhawk era, some of the best produced Greyhawk modules were done in that era. They had wonderful art, the covers and stuff. Not only the content, but also the production value, I think, are the top notch in the Greyhawk line. These were the super like Slavers and the Marklands and Adventure Begins and stuff. They had wonderful art. They are some of the best covers that ever been for Greyhawk and stuff. So I love them for many reasons. So they're really they're fantastic.
Yeah, I was reading that Art and Arcana book and was curious to see like what it would have to say about my era. And essentially like not much, because Art and Arcana is a triumphalist narrative, and it wasn't exactly a triumphal period, as far as the overall story of D&D goes. And so, like the only thing in that book that would indicate that I worked on D&D is they show an advertisement for the Apocalypse Stone that has my name on it, but otherwise.
Chris, that's a shame, because like it is my favorite time. It just the publications are wonderful. The third-party generic stuff is great that like Bruce Cordell did. It's wonderful in this era, and it's just, and like I said, Slavers is one of my favorites, and Ivid the Undying never got published. It's one of the Anna thinks it's the best publication.
Oh yeah,
ever,
I love for Greyhawk. I think Ivid the Undying is the best one for me, so to speak. But I love the source books that kind of explain the setting, and Carl Sargent's and others had kind of ramp up their ideas. So it was a shame that it never came out. But I'm so thankful that it got published, kind of just thrown out on the internet, so to speak. It is.
I don't know if Sean talked about this, but there was a point on the Greyhawk team where we created a whole plan for what to do with Greyhawk moving forward.
No, I don't think I hinted at it maybe, but not more than that. Yeah.
So like I've thought about it often, because I think it was a cool idea, and it never happened, obviously. But the idea was instead of giving people like a giant book of setting to try to learn in a go, which was really not how it was done back in the day, was to start with a localized area, like basically like something like the village of Hamlet, right? And then over a series of products to sort of zoom out from there. So you cover a village in its area, cover a town in its area, cover a province in its area. And the idea was to do it in the Great Kingdom. And then eventually that was going to lead to like a Great Kingdom source book and, and so on.
That would have been awesome, since that side of the setting has been neglected. And it's sad because it in the setting, it's the most important politically and militarily and in many ways the most important part of the setting that we have hardly no material. That's why I loved Even the Undying so much, because it actually kind of tapped into that part of Greyhawk and explained a lot of things, and it's kind of ad hoc, but it's still cool.
I love the era, and maybe I'm an exception, but it's a shame because
I love the era
much.
too. And then when 3rd edition came out, it was the standard setting, and I was like, oh, it was like yes, and then it kind of changed when 3.5 came out. But that said, that's like, what did you do after this happened, that era when
we have a big thing we missed. We have in that era we need to discuss. So 2 questions. First, the Apocalypse Stone. What was the idea behind the whole the Apocalypse Stone? Then let's talk about Chainmail, because that was this era too.
So the brief with the Apocalypse Stone was to do like an epic adventure that would help people like move their campaigns from 2nd edition to 3rd edition. So the idea was to do something like really like sort of earth-shaking, and you can kind of play it a couple of different ways. You can literally like destroy the world as one of the outcomes. And your characters may or may not survive, or the changes that take place can justify sort of the rules differences between 2nd edition.
Was 3rd edition announced when this came out, or was it still a secret?
It was, It was advertised as basically like a way to do that. To transition your campaign. So basically I wrote that with Jason Carl, and I came up with the whole background of it, which was inspired by Grail mythology. The whole idea of it is that there's this stone that's what's called the Axis Mundi, which is basically like the anchor stone of the world that holds it in its place amongst the planes. And the characters are tricked into stealing it out of like this Grail castle, and they think they're doing a good thing, but in fact they've fucked everything up. And all of a sudden, like, oh, we can't hear the gods anymore, and like planar travel doesn't work, and we can't contact the astral plane, and all this stuff. And then depending on how it plays out, you can either restore it, or the world can literally end, and you can blow up your campaign and stuff. It was fun because it was like an opportunity to actually use like the Tarrasque and have it make sense.
There you go.
Because why not?
Yes. Very, very cool. You generically placed it, I'm assuming, but you left it could go in Forgotten Realms, it could go in Greyhawk.
It was meant for any setting.
Okay. Neat. Neat concept.
It's funny, I like when was this? Like 2009 or 2010, I worked down in Austin for a video game company on a Warhammer 40K MMO that never came out. And I was having lunch with some of my team, and it somehow came up while we were like driving to lunch, and Apocalypse Stone came up, and I was like, oh yeah, like I co-wrote that. And this guy in the front seat like whips around, and he's like, you wrote the Apocalypse Stone? I was like, yeah. He's like, fuck you.
Nice.
His GM had run it for him and blown up their world.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm hoping Tim will come on, because when Tim found out you wrote Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, he's like, I got 1,000 questions. We'll see. We'll see. So Chainmail.
Yeah.
How did this come about? And it seems like it was bounced around. It was all over the place. So, was that because they couldn't make up their minds? So why don't you give us the story on the chainmail miniatures game?
So this is an extremely long story.
Oh,
so
it's
let
okay.
me know if
We love it. Yep.
We're good. No, we want to hear that.
Yeah.
So Wizards had the idea that they should start doing miniatures.
Oops.
And, because they always looked at Games Workshop and saw, the lock that Games Workshop had on that side of the industry.
Yeah.
And so they did one correct thing, which is that they sought out a good person to run a new department. And that guy was named Bob Watts. And Bob is like longtime miniatures industry guy. He got his start working at Grenadier, like back in the late 70s.
Makes sense.
Doing casting when he was like 16 or something like that. He had run Heartbreaker miniatures in the 90s. He had worked for Games Workshop. So, he knew his business. So they hired Bob. And when I heard that we were going to be doing miniatures within the company, and with my love of miniatures games, I wanted to be involved because it's, I don't know, I guess kind of silly in retrospect. But my feeling at the time was that it was going to be hard for me to make a mark as like the lowest guy on the RPG totem pole, because at the time, there were still people working there like Skip and Harold and Roger, with pedigrees going back 20 whatever years. And I felt like, well, this is a new thing that I could be part of.
Yeah.
And hell, I love minis. So I wanted to move over, and I want to specifically work on the design side of miniatures games. And there then proceeded to be this whole like absurd series of events where I interviewed with Bob. Bob was like, "Hey, you're my kind of people, great," and he wanted to hire me. And then it was just this sort of corporate nonsense where they insisted that I be given a different title than anybody else in the company had. I was called the brand development manager. And I was like, well, call me whatever, as long as I get to work on designing the miniatures games and stuff, it's fine. So I finally was moved over onto this new miniatures team. And then once I was there and I was the brand development manager, they then said, well, you can't do game design. You're not in R&D.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, what are you talking about? But it was like literally the point of me taking this job, So then, basically it was agreed that I could do the world design, but that the game design was going to have to be handled by other people in R&D. And they began to assign people to it who were not miniatures gamers. And so, the whole thing, I was just like, you need miniatures people to design the miniatures game.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bob tried to establish a traditional metal miniatures business. So, when we began by doing some RPG accessory miniatures, we did some D&D minis, we did some Star Wars minis. But the idea was that we wanted to do a D&D like mass battle war game, and that we would do a skirmish game as kind of an introduction and that would last about 6 months, and then it would scale up into you're controlling armies on the tabletop. So that was the original plan, and where did it go? At that time, it's when Pokemon was hitting and making gobs of money. And Pokemon made the entire company, I don't want to say crazy, that's ableist, but it
nuts. We're nuts. They were like,
everything was judged by the success of Pokemon. And so
you became this money sink almost, that you couldn't do anything, and because they earned so much money and you didn't earn anything. So
we had a meeting with the VP of sales, and he was like, "Are you guys going to make $10 million the first year?" And we said, "Well, probably not. This is a business that we have to build." And he was like, "Okay," and we were written off.
Wow. Because you weren't Pokemon.
And there was also like a big push within Wizards to make everything freaking collectible. And so there are people who were like, "You should make this miniatures game collectible." And we were all, sort of traditional minis fans. And we were like, "That's stupid, because miniatures people want to see the miniatures that they're buying."
Yeah.
And at the time, there had not been a collectible miniatures game. And then, unfortunately, WizKids came out with Mage Knight, and it was a big hit. And all of a sudden, there was an example in the marketplace of a successful collectible miniatures game, which was just more pressure on us. Be like, "Well, why don't you do something like this?"
Oh, man.
So anyway, poor Bob, like, if just left alone, Bob could have built a solid business. But Bob was basically like thrown into the middle of Wizards' internal politics, and he wasn't ready for it. He didn't have the skills to deal with the poisonous environment that was happening there at the time. And so, eventually he quit. And he went off and started Sabretooth Games and did other stuff. And now he works for Privateer, I think. So,
So, who was casting the minis for you? Were you doing it yourself, or was there?
Yeah, so we started a factory down in Renton, which is where Wizards is.
Right.
Oh
wow.
Trying to get this light off my face.
That's okay. I know.
No problem.
So yeah, we started a factory, and this just goes to show the sort of short-term thinking that was going on, is where like we had this space, and we could have, it was basically a building divided into 3 parts, and we could have taken the middle space, and that would have allowed us to expand if needed in the future by taking on the other spaces in the building. And they were like, "No, we're going to instead just get this smaller space that's somewhere else," because no one had any idea that this was like a business that could grow. So yeah, we were casting our own miniatures on a pewter. And after Bob left, there were several other people who were slotted in to run the miniatures group. One of them was a TSR person who didn't believe that D&D should be anything except the RPG, like not novels, not miniatures, not nothing. So the first thing he tried to do was cancel the whole project.
Oh my God.
And we were like, "Hey, bud, maybe don't cancel our jobs." So he was unable to do that, but he was able to scale the whole thing down from a mass battle game to just a skirmish game. And the problem with that was that the skirmish game was something that you could play with like 6 to 12 miniatures. And that's fine, but that's not going to give you the kind of revenue that you can get out of a mass battle game where people have to buy.
Like Warhammer 40K.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That was the whole idea of starting this group, was to try to, get a mass battle game going that would, require people to get a bunch of miniatures. So that wasn't any good. And then they later hired another guy into that slot whose background was like selling medical devices. He didn't know anything about miniatures. And, I began to feel like, the way to get what I wanted was to tell him the opposite of what I really wanted, because he seemed to always do the opposite of what I suggested. So,
oh my gosh.
So in the middle of all that, we have to have a setting for this game. And it was supposed to be a D&D game. So my immediate impulse was, well, look, we should do the Greyhawk Wars. We've got giant wars.
Got a box set by Zeb coming out.
Yeah,
we've got material to work with. We should do that. And then the brand people said to me, like, "Oh, well, you can't do that because the RPGA, like, they own Greyhawk. It belongs to them. So you can't do anything with that."
So no synergy was not even thought of as a good idea?
Apparently not.
Oh,
So wait, the RPGA owned Greyhawk at that time?
Yeah, well, that's what I was told. And
Yeah.
the pisser one, I knew Eric Mona, but we weren't like really friends yet at that point.
Right.
And so it was only later in talking about it, that I wished that I had gone to talk to him then, because he said, yeah, if anyone had asked me, I would have said, great.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Wow.
So with that off the table, I began to design just a new D&D set. And I spent, I don't know, a year or something working on that. And I created all the factions, I did the whole backstory and all that stuff. And then later in this process, then people changed their mind and came back to me and said, could you actually put this into the world of Greyhawk? I was like, oh, great. Well, now that I've done all this work on the factions and the characters and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, let me see. And so, that's when I went to the old like Dragon Annual map and had, the supercontinent and all that stuff.
Right.
And I thought, well, maybe I can put it, out here, away from the Flyness and so on. And so that's what I did is I basically found an area on that map and fit the work that I had done onto it. And yeah, so then technically it became Greyhawk, although it's kind of funny because at the time, like Greyhawk fans did not embrace this like at all. They were like, this isn't Greyhawk, this is bullshit, But I think because the fact that the game was so short-lived and the setting has never been touched by Wizards like ever again, like that really played into the whole story of Greyhawk. So like subsequently people have come to me and been like, oh, actually, like this is pretty cool.
My opinion is that the setting and material is cool, but the problem is the map. That is not a good, that's a terrible map, but the written material is great. So but the map is terrible because the person who did the map, I have no idea who that was, had no idea how big that part of the world was. It looks like it's some little barony somewhere that was on a little island and not a continent, so to speak.
Yeah, no, it's huge.
And then Skip told us he spent a weekend and just started filling in names on it because they needed it for publication.
Well, that was the original Dragon's Annual map was done over a weekend without much afterthought. So it's kind of, it's interesting how that kind of grew. I just did a model of the whole planet where I read through all this and tried to make sense of it. And it's kind of, it's interesting. But sorry, please go.
No, I got 3 questions from the audience regarding chainmail. Okay.
Yeah.
First one is from Christoph. Could the God War have ended other than with one faction creating the new God of War?
Sure, why not?
Okay. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
Second one, in Sundered Empires, the Killsec were forced out of Arelhai Sinlu. I'm assuming because they were house number 2 and went west and were one of the 7 or 8 warring empires. Do you remember about that? House Killsec, when D3 was the second, they were Loth worshippers.
So House Killsec, so basically the material that we launched with was all the stuff I had been working with before I had to reintegrate things into Greyhawk. So there wasn't a huge amount of links to older Greyhawk material in that stuff. But as we were developing the line through source books and things, I wanted to try to forge more links like that. And so when we decided we're going to introduce the Drow, I very consciously, went back to Vault of the Drow to see if there was material that I could draw from. And that's where the whole story of Killsec, basically leaving that area and coming to the chainmail setting, that's where that all comes from.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. It's good. Well, it's good to see that you were thinking about actual name content already and putting it out there. And man, it's a shame. It's like what would have been if it was part of the wars. I know.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yep.
Another question is. So Christoph also asks, how long do you think the God War would have been likely to last without a victor?
Well, I mean, so the kind of idea of the setting was that it wasn't something that we would resolve in the game because it was the reason everyone was fighting. So, we wanted the game to go on. So it wasn't necessarily like a limited arc story that was gonna, eventually in some supplement it would end. It was sort of a kind of a setup that would to give you a background for the battles that you were having. We didn't, I suppose if it had lasted long enough, perhaps we would have looked at a way to end that stage and start a new stage of things. But because the game ultimately was in existence for so short a time, like it just never happened.
Yeah.
Christoph also said, how much were you actually involved in the making of the actual map for Western Uruk for Chainmail? Was it in depth, or were you trying to fit it in, or?
I basically printed out the shape, and filled in my ideas on where things might go, and I forget who it was who actually made it. Yeah, I don't remember who that was.
So Big Mac asks, ask Chris about the canceled flying miniatures for Chainmail. Did you create any lore around them that wasn't published?
Huh. I gotta say I don't remember. I was laid off in March of 2002, basically just about 4 years after I came on board there. And Chainmail continued on after that for a little while. So there was some of the final stuff I wasn't involved with. Yeah. Then, one of the most hilarious Chainmail stories that there is I was still going down to Wizards to actually play miniatures games with my longtime friend Rick, which we still do on a more or less weekly basis. And I found out while I was down there that they were going to cancel the game. And this was 2 weeks before Origins, and Chainmail was up for an Origins award. And so when I found that out, I was like, maybe you'd like to not cancel it until the Origins Awards happen, because it's going to be real awkward if the game you just canceled wins an award. And they blew me off, and they announced the cancellation, and then Chainmail won an Origins Award.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So I was there, so I went up and gave what I'm told was a memorable speech.
It probably helped you in what you did not want to do at your company, correct? All that experience, which is probably why you've been so successful.
So was Green Ronin started right after you left? Did you kind of picked it up, starting your own publishing business?
No, I started actually during my time at Wizards.
Okay, yeah.
So like my whole background actually comes out of the punk rock scene. So like do it yourself, that whole attitude is really baked into me. So me and Wizards, it was always a weird fit, So after I stopped working on RPGs at Wizards, I found at a certain point that I kind of missed doing that work. So I decided I was going to start a company on the side, just kind of keep my finger in the role-playing pie. And we initially started working on a game called Orc, the role-playing game, which is a beer and pretzels game.
Yeah,
I think we got
Paranoia with orcs. And it was while I was working on that the whole idea of the D20 logo and the open game license was being floated at Wizards. And so I remember very clearly being in a meeting where it was all being explained, and how basically like Wizards didn't want to bother doing things like short adventures, because they weren't agile enough and all this and that, and hopefully these other companies would pick up that sort of thing. And I was like, well, shit, I can be agile. And so that's what led to Death in Freeport. The first D20 adventure that we released came out the same day as the 3rd edition Player's Handbook, Gen Con 2000. So
because that's such a cool mainstay Freeport setting. Please tell us more about the Freeport and its background, and because it's
Don't-
kind of been a.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
got a couple more. Let's get
yep.
to the Green Run out, because I want to do the whole end with the Green Run.
Okay. Yeah, please. Okay.
I want to
Yep,
do 2 more questions on. I don't want to forget these.
Yeah, sure.
Did you ever read with Northwest Orc and Sundered Empires, where it was decided? Did you ever read Black Moon Chronicles? Someone asks.
Nope.
Okay, I don't know why you asked that question, Josh, but that was a strikeout in that question. There you go.
Who wrote that?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was in relation to. How prevalent were dragons, drakes involved in daily life in Revilla? Were they pet drakes or drakes as beasts of burden?
Huh.
These are, I'm telling you, I'm asking. These are audience questions.
Off the top of my head, I can't really recall.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem.
What sort of undead Amut from Amut's Legion was supposed to be? Was he a Death Knight or something else?
He was not a Death Knight. He was sort of I don't know. He was a unique undead creation.
Okay. Like an animus type almost. I said that as a joke from Evity and Dying. All right. So when you get laid off and you decide to just go with your own company and do a lot of freelance work, I know Freeport starts then, as Anna was saying, but you also took on some other licenses. I know that, was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, did you go back to it at that point, or was that beforehand? That second edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, you did a lot of work on.
Yeah. So Green Renine started in 2000.
Right. Okay.
We released Death in Freeport, Gen Con that year.
Okay.
And then that was like a huge hit. We sold 10,000 copies of it in like 3 months, which, for a brand new company was crazy.
That's Pathfinder.
And so, so we continued on. We did a trilogy of Freeport adventures.
Here it is.
And then in 2001, we began expanding out, doing more D20 stuff. And then we just sort of kept growing from there. So we did Mutants and Masterminds. We did the city book for Freeport. We did things like Book of Fiends, which is actually about to come back in a 5th edition incarnation. And
a whole series of these books.
Yeah, the advanced books. Yep.
Awesome books. Yep.
And so I guess it was around 2003 maybe. I started talking to Games Workshop.
Okay.
And there was rumors they were gonna try to bring the role-playing game back. And I basically negotiated a deal where Green Renine would become the design house for the 2nd edition role-playing game. So basically we would do the design, the layout, all that stuff. And we would deliver books ready to go to print to Black Industries, which was a department within Games Workshop that was going to be releasing the RPGs. So yeah, I got to be the lead designer for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition, which was like a dream come true for me, because when I was in college, like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was our game of choice. So I loved the setting.
And just speaking of the devil, the ever mysterious Tim is about to hop on. Perfect timing.
Oh,
I love how light it is on magic. I mean, magic spells are very. Tim, hello. Look at the look at all the real weaponry in the background. He's a little. He's a little off. Tim,
hi, Tim. I see you're heavily armed.
Tim.
Yeah, they are. They're really heavy.
We just started talking about Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Look at that timing. 2nd edition. So we're talking about how Chris got the license for it and all. And so, Tim, what are your thoughts on that game system? I know you love it.
Oh, I'm a big fan of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and I say so fairly not annoyingly frequent on a D&D stream, but I do say it. And I took some expanded critical hits made for Warhammers, because the grit is real, and transformed it into D&D, and I have a fair number of player characters just from one DM under my belt already.
Yeah, killed on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry. You say something.
Oh yeah, it was a really fun project to work on because I was so fond of that setting. And back in the around about 1995, when James Wallace's company Hogshead had the license for that, um, James had put together this big adventure called Dying of the Light, and I wrote a chapter for that that involved the Famir, who I love, and yeah, it had been exciting to be involved back then, and then having the opportunity to lead the design for a new edition was it was just great. So and then we put out a lot of source material over the next few years, many books. I think it was the best supported that Warhammer Roleplay had ever been up to that point.
I think so.
Yeah.
I know I got a good number of them on my bookshelf. So
yeah, Rob Schwab had been my D20 line developer, and at a certain point he took over running the Warhammer line, and that was a match made in hell. Rob was very well suited for that.
So, Tim, if I recall correctly, I had an outlaw leader, right?
Outlaw Chief.
Outlaw Chief. That's what I had. Outlaw Chief. Yeah. What was the guy who sat on with the blunderbuss? What was that class? Coachman. Yeah. I mean, they were really cool. It was a really cool system. I know the magic was extremely limited. One guy cast a light spell, and that was it. Right. If I recall correctly.
Yeah. That might have been actually first edition.
Okay.
But I mean, those character careers overlapped.
Yeah.
But my question I had, if I'm free to ask,
yes, please,
was really about some decisions like what was. Do you remember what was the inspiration for kind of adding the fortune point to the whole fate point system?
Oh yeah, it was just to give players, like a little bit of a currency that they could spend, to I don't know, give them some opportunities to change their fate.
Because they died a lot very quickly.
I can't even keep a straight face. I'm like, yeah, they could use that. They could use that. So
yeah, I mean, it can be unforgiving.
Yeah, I can do that in my own home rules for D&D as well, thing like that. And what was the biggest? I'm interested in the change. The magic system, I think, is one of the biggest changes between the first and second.
Yep.
And kind of, how did that come about? How did you come up with that?
Well, basically, I mean, the first edition magic system, like nobody liked, it came out, and even at the time, Games Workshop was like, yeah, we know this isn't great, but don't worry, we have this great book called Realms of Sorcery coming out, and that's gonna, completely remake the magic system. And then, it never came out from Games Workshop. And Hogshead eventually did a version of that book. It came out in the late 90s, but that book, I mean, it had a lot of good info in it, but I think it tried to incorporate too much of the stuff from the miniatures game into the RPG. And so, I didn't think it was, I don't know, didn't feel right for player characters, like battle magic is kind of different than the sort of stuff a bunch of scrubby adventurers are going to be doing. So yeah, I just thought it was an opportunity to just design something new. So I did.
And the Empire was definitely going to control it if they could, and so that's what influenced the college system. Is that?
Well, yeah, the Colleges of Magic. They, that was something that they came up with originally for the miniatures game. So yeah, we had to reflect that in some fashion. Yeah, it was. I mean, the game was tricky in that they wanted us to try to maintain the timeline that was happening in the miniatures game, and so they had just done this like huge event called the Storm of Chaos, where chaos armies invade out of the north, and the whole like northeastern part of the empire was essentially like sacked and burned, and and all this and that. And I was like, that's not great. I'm like, this is sort of like doing a World War II RPG that's set in 1946, and like I felt like it should either be in the middle of that or before it, and we could have adventures and things where you could maybe play through those events. But it didn't seem like a great sort of neutral starting point. But I didn't really get a vote, so we did the best that we could.
Post major war conflict does allow, there's opportunity and chaos, and there's tons of chaos going on.
No, that's true. Yeah.
So you didn't, when it went to third edition in the future, you didn't ask to do that at that point? You had parted ways with them, or was it?
Well, we put our hats in the ring to take. So basically, Games Workshop, they shut down their role-playing game group, Black Industries, sort of without warning. Basically, like on a Friday, they released the Warhammer 40K role-playing game, and it sold a lot. And then Monday, the group got canceled, and people were transferred to other departments or fired. So then, like the state of the RPG was kind of in flux, and so I was like, well, hey, like if you want somebody to take these games on and shepherd them, like we could do that. And I was told basically like, well, we need some time to figure out what to do. So, like give us a few weeks and we'll talk about it. And I said, okay. And then they, like 2 weeks later, they were like, yeah, we're giving everything to Fantasy Flight, RPG, board games, card games, like the whole kit and caboodle. I was like, oh, awesome. So,
jeez.
So that's how that happened. And then Fantasy Flight hired us actually to do a final second edition Warhammer book, which was called, what was it? Shades of Empire. So we put that together for them, and unbeknownst to us, they were working on third edition at that time. So basically, we were sort of keeping second edition going while they worked on third, and then they released that, and we didn't have anything to do with it after that.
Okay. Interesting times, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody have anything to do with third edition?
Yeah.
Nope.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like D&D 4th edition. Like, what were they thinking, right? So, all right. So during this whole time, though, Death in Freeport comes out, and I know you re-released it in 5e, which is up now, and so that was the big kickoff of your Freeport series in 2000. So it's been around for 21 years, and you just expanded on it, with a lot of. And I found. Is this the main? Is that the? I know it's a Pathfinder version, but is that the main setting book for
that is the most recent setting book. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And it's the biggest book we've ever published. It's like 544 pages.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I want everyone to note it's gone from 3 $10 gift certificates to 5 gift certificate giveaways tonight, 2 of $25 and 3 of $10, courtesy of some of our great community members, Cannabelle and Zarathon. So we're going to do 5 giveaways, all the Green Ronin games tonight. All right, just to let everyone know. That's so if you win that, you'll have your pick. You'll have your pick of the Freeport. I think PDF is 20. I think for this one, it's in that range. Yeah, so you'll be able, to get some good stuff from.
Yeah.
It.
So
Go ahead, Chris.
So Freeport, we developed for the D&D 3 and 3.5 rules for a bunch of years.
Okay.
And then like when Wizards was working on 4th edition, and we were concerned like what it would mean for third-party publishers. We did a book called The Pirate's Guide to Freeport, and that was a source book without game material in it. So it was just meant to be a pure setting book. And then, we would support it with some companion books for different rule systems. And the idea was that would kind of insulate us from whatever Wizards chose to do. So if they put out 4th edition and didn't let companies support it, or, if they put it out and we didn't like it or whatever. So we did that, and then we did a whole series of these companion books for a bunch of different rule systems. Of course, we did 3.5, but we also did like Savage Worlds and True 20 and Castles and Crusades and probably more I'm forgetting. And that was like a fun approach, but the problem became when we would do something new, all the fans of those different systems were like, when are you going to put out the stats for my game? And then that would mean like every adventure would have to have like 5 or 6 different versions, and it just logistically became a pain. And so eventually when we did the big book, we decided to just marry it back up to its sort of original home, in the form of Pathfinder, the successor to D&D 3.5. And that just made it easier because we had one rule system to support, which we did until Pathfinder 2 came out, and then I was like, oh, for fuck's sake. So.
Absolutely. We'll stay with the original Pathfinder. All right, Chris, I have a quote here. Our canonistas in the Discords are like unbelievable, and this is from Ian World, August 2007. Okay? Your quote. When I first was creating Freeport, setting described in Green Ronin material, I had the Lordship of the Isles in mind. The assassination of Anton Drak was meant to echo the overflow of Prince Latmic Ranald, yellow sign equals scarlet sign in this equation. As others have pointed out, though, you could easily use Freeport in other locations as well.
Yeah, that's all true.
Okay.
Wow. Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah. It's funny because I remember thinking like, obviously people will figure this out, and I don't know why I was so confident about that, because as far as I'm aware, nobody actually figured it out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I believe that Big Mac gave this to me, or Obsidian, one of them gave it to me, and I was like, oh, that's cool. So you think Freeport would go perfectly in the Lordship of the Isles somewhere?
Yeah, that was my idea.
Okay.
And then the whole part where Drak is assassinated, that was essentially meant to be at the kickoff of the Greyhawk Wars and stuff.
Okay.
But,
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other locations in Greyhawk that you'd think, it could be cool for Freeport? I was thinking, is it too much for like Blue and the Pomars? It doesn't fit there really.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not an island, I guess. So.
Yeah. Okay, so Freeport's on an island, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. How about off of one of the iconic Lendors? Anywhere there, or one of the islands near Lendor would that?
Yeah, I mean, it could be.
Okay.
So, like, the whole idea of Freeport is it's like a little group of 4 islands, and I did eventually. There's like a chapter in the city books that explores the setting beyond Freeport. The idea is that the core 4 islands in the city could be dropped into any campaign setting that you want. And it was, sort of meant to be easy that way. And so, there's all this stuff in the history that just talks about the continent, and, that can be Greyhawk, or could be the known world, or, whatever you want. So
very, very cool. Tim, do you own any of the Freeport products?
I don't think so. Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's always a complaint that we don't have enough developed city locations in Greyhawk, right? That you can just adventure out of. I mean, Greyhawk's there, Harby's there.
So
this
Freeport is a perfect
two-in.
Yeah.
Especially if you're into ship bay. And Chris, with miniatures now, I mean, Reaper has that 30-inch long ship coming out in Bones 5, and we're excited to get that for our Heartbeat campaigning. But with, I'm assuming there's a lot of piracy discussion and privateering and letters of marque in Freeport, and it's kind of perfect for that setting. So that would be really, really cool. I'm looking forward to getting it and reading up on it. All right, so go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Do you want to hear about the Greyhawk campaign I ran within the last decade?
Of course, let's do it. Yeah, definitely. Let's hear it.
So I don't know, 10 years ago or something, my stepdaughter was 16, and I was like, hey, Kate, like, I'm going to run a little family game. I just want you to kind of experience what D&D used to be like, because, she had started role playing in like the 3rd edition era. So I was like, let me run some old D&D for you, just so you can get a taste of it. So I set up what started as a small game just for my wife Nicole and Kate, where I was running the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh.
Nice.
And so we just ran it as like a little family game, and I used 2nd edition rules with house rules because as one does. And then like it was just meant to be like a short little thing, and then after a month or two, Kate was like, well, can we play this on our like regular game night with everybody else? And I was like, yeah, if you want to. And so then it turned into like a, I don't know, 3-year campaign or something.
Nice.
In the Saltmarsh area, Keeland and the Hoole Marshes and all that stuff. But yeah, it went on for quite some time.
Awesome.
So,
play any other iconic games like Baltron's Beacons right there, or any of the, and Tomb of the Lizard King, any of those in that?
Yeah, so basically what I did was I ran Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh and then Danger at Dunwater.
Yep.
And then I used a mix of other old adventures along with some third-party stuff. So I actually used Of Sound Mind, which is an adventure by Kevin Culp, a D20 adventure. Just converted it over. And I think Fiery Dragon published that. So I used that at one point. I used Baltron's Beacon, and in fact, the party ended up taking over that castle and like refurbishing it, and it became their like home base.
Cool.
And then I used one of Paizo's D20 modules, Carrion Hill, I think it's called, which was like a horror module. And I tied that in with Therisdun and all this stuff. And I think the last thing I did was I used part of Tomb of the Lizard King. So yeah, for something that started as kind of a lark, like it ended up being one of the most successful campaigns that I've run in the last decade. So.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
So we got 2 things. I got a question from, first thing I'll do is Christoph's question. Is that game where Torsten 3i came from?
No. That is for my friend Bill, who's one of my college buddies. I started to game with them during quarantine over Zoom, and he's running Curse of Strahd. So I created Torsten 3i for that.
Okay.
And I gave him a whole deep, ridiculous Greyhawk background.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So Rich has an idea, and we should work on this. We should, Anna, this is partly my idea, we should put Freeport on the map in the Lordship of the Isles. On Anna's map, we should put it on, right? It should be there because that's where Chris intended it. And then Rich put postcard for Lordship of the Isles is Gary's. I'm assuming it's not done yet, or is it done, Rich? Because we have that in Cannon Fire. But if someone else wants to do a version first, we can put that one up on Point to Freeport as a source book.
What we should do, I think, is that make sure that we can match the general area, so anyone who wants to use Freeport can use it to replace one of the cities that are there, so to speak. I think that's the instead of just adding a city that was not there, because we can adjust it so we can make sure that the Freeport map could be matched straight in.
Okay.
I'm going to look into it.
Okay, good.
That sounds like a really interesting project. Yep.
Yeah. So Chris, and I'm going to link this. Cannon Fire has a card and map area of every adventure ever published in Greyhawk. And you just press on it, and it goes to A1, L1, and they show, including Carlos Lysing's adventures, including Dragon Magazine articles, including mine I did with Carlos, which is Horror in the Hools, by the way. That's ironic. You said you played there. And there's a lot of adventures that are in that, and source books and stuff. And there's no reason we can't place Freeport in there, because that's where you intended it. So I thought it was a cool thing.
Yep.
So if I'm looking here in chat, just seeing if I missed anything. I want to make sure I get everyone's questions. There's an iconic game, an RPG. It's one of my favorites of all time. How did you get to be so honored as to write up the RPG for Dragon Age? Which is such a wonderful, wonderful 3 series of computer games with add-ons and everything. Just wonderful.
Yeah. So most of our licenses are things that I had to seek out, but the fun thing about Dragon Age was that actually Bioware came to us, surprisingly enough.
Nice.
So yeah, they came to me, and basically this is while they were working on Dragon Age Origins, and they said, hey, so we're doing this game. It's like the spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate.
Oh yeah.
And we think it'd be cool if there was a tabletop game to go with it. And would you be interested in doing it? And so, I was like, well, let's see. Spiritual successor to Baldur's Gate, you're BioWare. Yeah, I think I'm interested.
Yeah, it comes kind of automatic. Yep.
Yeah. So for me, it was an opportunity to go to computer role-playing fans and ideally introduce them to the fun of tabletop role-playing. So my design goal when designing the Dragon Age RPG was to make it very friendly to people who hadn't done tabletop RPGs before. And it seems to have worked because I continue to meet people who tell me, hey, that was my first role-playing game.
So you developed a whole system from the ground up for this?
Yes.
Okay.
What is now known as the Adventure Game Engine. And it actually has gone on to power most of Green Ronin's RPGs these days, with the exceptions of Mutants and Masterminds and Orc.
Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed you have, on your site, you have different sets of RPGs, but they're kind of based all around this system. All right, that's good to know. That's good.
Yeah. So Blue Rose,
Citadel,
The Expanse, Fantasy Age, Modern Age.
Yeah.
Those all use the Adventure Game Engine.
Yeah, because I found this one. I found really intriguing. Lost Citadel.
Oh yeah, that's 5th edition rules.
Okay, it's just 5th edition. Okay.
So that's the setting more than a game, so to speak. Or
Yeah, it's not a standalone game. It's
it's a setting. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
The art itself was like, wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's a Todd Lockwood cover, so.
Oh,
It's
okay.
beautiful.
See,
It's
there you have it. Yep.
So, can you tell us that is BioWare planning a new Dragon Age game, and if they contacted you about doing RPG material for it?
I believe they are working on a new game. We have not talked to them about it yet.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. I know it was in discussion, and Inquisition was just. I still play it. I still go back and play that. What a great game that is.
Yeah.
Building your own keep.
They just released the Legendary Edition for Mass Effect, and their other pillar is Dragon Age. So certainly wouldn't surprise me if they develop.
Hopefully. Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah.
Awesome. Were you allowed to develop any of the lore? Because you have blood magic in there, which is really cool and really nasty. And you have, I forget what the stone. I haven't played in a while. The stone that corrupts everything. Yeah. And those, you have the corrupted demon things running around. Oh my gosh, nasty stuff. So
we were able to develop some stuff, but it was one of those situations where it's like we were able to publish some things, and then later they revisited those things
thank you, Mystery,
and decided to go a different way. So like the way we described the Avar culture in one of our early books, like they later developed Avar culture in a different direction. And of course, it's it's their property.
Right.
They can do
right. Absolutely.
It's one of the perils of licensed stuff.
Tim, you have any questions to this point? I know you asked some about Warhammer Fantasy Role.
No, I know.
No Green Ronin.
No,
you said you had a lot of public. You had a lot of their stuff.
I said I had a lot of. The magic question was the biggest one I had.
Oh, okay, I just want to make sure. Let you just sit.
Don't want to go too far because talking about the game system of Warhammer, because this is not about Warhammer.
It's all over the place. We're okay.
Yeah.
We're okay asking stuff.
Yeah. I have a question about the Blue Rose. Is very interesting. It's the role-playing game of romantic fantasy. I think it was intriguing because it's unique. I never seen a game like it before. Can you please explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So the idea of Blue Rose was basically like in RPGs, the sort of literary antecedents of D&D are, authors I'm sure that we all know and love, right? Tolkien, Robert E. Howard, Michael Moorcock, Fritz Lieber, all that kind of stuff. But there's other literary traditions of fantasy, and Blue Rose was instead inspired by stuff like Mercedes Lackey and Tamara Pierce and Diane Duane and sort of that whole side of things. And so it is like a different aesthetic and different thematically, from from the classic, like, mercenaries or murder hobos, it's not like a typical D&D party. So instead of, you meet at a tavern, you get paid gold to go into dungeons and, to take care of problems. Instead, Blue Rose is centered on a kingdom that, it's like an actual good kingdom that you're happy to be a part of. It's, it's a meritocracy, there is like a nobility, but they have to earn it. It's not by blood. And generally speaking, your player characters are part of a group called the Sovereign's Finest, who work for the Queen and solve, internal and external problems for the Queen. So basically, instead of like going out into the wilderness, or these like haunted areas or whatever, it's like you're protecting something that you find value in, and it's like you're protecting your chosen family,
Okay.
That's kind of the idea. So it's and just sort of aesthetically, it's more like Age of Sail over like Dark Ages or medieval. So there's a swashbuckling side to it, which is fun. So yeah, it's a fun fantasy setting, and it uses the Fantasy Age rules as its base.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Canadian Ancient Gamer asked, why was Thieves World RPG discontinued?
Well, so we had a basic plan for it, which we executed, and it just didn't sell as well as we hoped.
Okay.
And part of that had to do with the fact that it came out sort of in the later part of the D20 era. So, there was a huge glut of D20 products, as I'm sure everyone.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It's an expression well known in the RPG industry.
Yeah.
The D20 glut. Yeah.
So yeah, by the time that stuff came out, it was just harder and harder to sell D20 stuff. And it's too bad, because I was always fond of the Thieves World books when I was young. And working with Lynn Abbey was actually terrific. She's one of the best licensors that we ever worked with. She was totally available to us to answer questions. She sat down with Rob Schwab and really like systematized how magic worked in Thieves World so we could do the magic rules right. She paid her own way to come to Gen Con the year we released it, did signings in our booth, and then Owen Stevens ran a game for basically a bunch of the developers. And so Lynn played a Sadanzo fortune teller, which was awesome. So, she was great. I really couldn't have asked for a better partner. But we did the books we had planned, and then it just didn't seem to make financial sense to do any more at that point.
Dwayne Costa asked, Chris, please expound on design goals for the Age engine and its related systems. What features distinguish it from other TTRPG systems? What are your future plans for the product line?
Yeah, very interesting. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interesting.
The Age system in most permutations is a class and level system, although Modern Age actually doesn't use classes. Or the Expanse for that matter. But a lot of it, if you've played D&D, is familiar as far as the basics go. But what makes it different, sort of its killer app, is what's called the stunt system. So the game uses 3d6 for resolution instead of a d20, so you get the nice bell curve. So the best warrior in the land doesn't have a 5% chance of cutting his foot off every time he swings a sword. So basically the way it works, initially this was just done in combat, but as the system has developed, it's now used in all sorts of different things, in social encounters and exploration encounters and so on. Is that when you try to do something, you roll your 3d6, 2 of the dice are one color, the third die is a different color. So that third die is variously called the stunt die or the dragon die or the drama die, depending on what game you're talking about. So if you roll doubles on any of the dice and you succeed in what you're doing, you then generate stunt points equal to the results of the stunt die. And depending on the type of encounter you're in, there's a little menu of things that you can do with those stunt points. And the idea is it's not something that you hang on to. It's not like a resource to be hoarded. It's you get it, you spend it, you do something cool, and you move on. So, so you will generate generally between 1 and 6 stunt points. There's then a little menu that shows you what stunts you can do and how many points that they cost. So if you get 5 stunt points, you could do 1 5-point stunt, 1 3 and 1 2, 2 2s and a 1, however you want to do it. And then you sort of narrate the cool stuff that you did. So it essentially began as like a dynamic critical hit system. So, if you got like 5 stunt points when you hit somebody with an axe, you could choose from a variety of effects. You could bash them backwards, you can do extra damage, you can try to disarm them, all that sort of stuff.
Likes that.
But then in social encounters, they have different effects, based on you being charming or intimidating or, whatever. And so the nice thing about the system is that your odds of rolling doubles on 3d6 is nearly 50%. So unlike sort of a d20 based system where, 1 roll in 20, you might have a crit. The stunt stuff is coming up like all the time. And it's just an opportunity to like do cool stuff with your character. And that's really the most unique feature of the adventure game engine games.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
So this looked interesting to me, and it was by Robert Schwab. Sword Chronicle, Feudal Fantasy and Role Playing. I just tell me a little bit about it. Is it?
So that rule system was originally developed for our Game of Thrones role playing game, which is called The Song of Ice and Fire.
Right. Okay.
So we were lucky enough to get the license for Game of Thrones before the HBO deal was signed. And so HBO, they hoovered up all sorts of rights, but they couldn't have role-playing games because we already had it.
Nice.
So we did like a design summit. This was back in, I don't know what, 2008 or something like that, where we flew Rob Schwab and Steve Kenson out here and spent a weekend in my kitchen just talking over what happens in the books and what sort of stuff we thought should be reflected in the system. And then Rob then went off and designed what we called the Chronicle system. And then we published that game for a bunch of years, but eventually the license expired. And then we decided during quarantine, Malcolm Shepard is one of our developers, thought that might be an opportune time to strip out the Westeros content and just release kind of a generic version of those rules. And that's what Sword Chronicle is. So we released that last summer, and we started a community content program to go with it. So other publishers can publish compatible material as well.
Okay. So, Song of Fire and Ice. Did you have anything to do with all the great miniatures that got published and all those box sets that they came out with? I mean, unbelievable stuff. I know my bill. No. Okay.
No, that was Simon. They did
Okay.
that.
Okay. Yeah, because some nice stuff. My buddy Bill.
I wanted to design a miniatures game that we would release as part of the RPG line, but that did not happen.
So the RPG line, do you still publish out content for the Song of Fire and Ice RPG line, or is that
no?
Okay.
No, the license ended, so we had to stop selling it.
Okay, so including old content.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, you can find it on eBay and stuff like that, but
Okay.
we can't sell it directly.
Okay. Wow. Interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, the fun thing about Chronicle System is that the sort of conceit of the game was that you would create your own minor noble house, and then that the house would engage in the Game of Thrones. So part of character creation is essentially also creating the noble house that you're all a part of. So every character you make has a role within the house. So you could be a maester, you could be a knight, you could be an heir, whatever it is. And that's sort of the glue that holds the characters together. And you have individual character goals, but you're also striving, to improve the position of your house in the politics of Westeros. We then later did a Night's Watch source book that adapted that system. Instead of making a noble house, you made a castle along the wall, and then you were all Night's Watch members. Or you could create a wildling village, and you could all play wildlings. So,
Oh, that sounds cool.
yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun.
All right, so throw me out a couple more general questions while we have Chris for a couple more minutes here. But I wanted to ask you this: what would you, if you had an opportunity to go back to do Greyhawk content, would you like to attempt or write about or write an adventure for?
I mean, I would just like to see Greyhawk represented to a new generation in a way that was friendly and welcoming, and just like, hey everyone, like, here's this great setting that dates back to the very origins of D&D, and not tell people to go find books that have been out of print for 30 years and like investigate obscure corners of lore, which is fun, don't get me wrong, but like it can be intimidating for a new person to be presented with something that's like labyrinthine and complicated. I just love to see like a new basic Greyhawk setting book that could get the newer generation into the setting, because I think it has a lot to offer, but it's just it doesn't have it's never gotten the Realms treatment from Wizards. It just never has. So and I mean, even the Realms, like, you'd forget anything other than the Sword Coast exists for most of what Wizards does. But
Chris, that's one of the reasons why this community that we have exists. We have Greyhawk Online Discord, we have Cannon Fire Discord, we have Me as Streamer, we have more and more Greyhawk streamers every month. So it's kind of like got a resurgence there, but unless WotC puts out a book, it's not going to be en masse. We know that, but or they open up the DM's Guild, which they haven't done. So well, I mean, they may eventually revisit it because I mentioned earlier that Ray Wininger is running D&D right now. Ray's like an old dear friend. He actually was a player in the Greyhawk campaign I told you about. He was a member of our regular game group for years. And so he's now running D&D, and he wrote stuff going back to at least second edition, maybe even first. Really knows and loves D&D, and so I think there's an opportunity with him in charge that didn't exist before to explore more of D&D's legacy, than Wizards has done previously. So fingers crossed.
Yep, awesome.
I saw a post that you had, a few months ago, and Dwayne Costa asked, do Green Ronin RPG games as Fantasy Age have a significant presence on any of the VTTs? And I saw something about you creating your own VTT group.
Yes. So we have lagged a bit in our creation of VTT content, but we finally now have a dedicated group that is working on that stuff. And so actually in just a week or two, we're going to release the first thing for it, which is actually our 5th edition, 20th anniversary edition of Death in Freeport.
Beautiful.
And we're going to put that up on Roll20. We also have people working on Fantasy Grounds and Foundry material. So we're sort of in this stage now where we're trying to get some of our older material up, but also try to coordinate some of our new releases to have VTT stuff released concurrently or shortly after something releases. Because quarantine has certainly proved that that is an arena that we should be in more than we are.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So let's see here. We got a question from I saw North Shore. He said, "What is one property you would love to write an adaptation for?"
Good question. It's funny, like as I've aged, like I used to have like a ready list of things I'd love to do, and I don't know, just like I'm more keen on doing my own thing. But if there was one thing that I could muster enthusiasm for, it would be Middle Earth, just because of how it played such an important role in me turning into the person that I am and having the career that I have. The sad part is that I almost had it.
Really?
Yeah, when we were working with Games Workshop, Black Industries wanted to do a Middle Earth role-playing game, because Games Workshop, they did a whole bunch of Lord of the Rings miniatures games, and a whole line of beautiful miniatures sculpted by the Perry twins. And
I have some of them.
Same.
yeah, they're great. And so they just wanted to append role-playing rights to their existing contract. And then Green Ronin was going to get to actually design the game. And I was like, hell yes, my childhood dream come true. But the wrench in the works was Decipher, because Decipher had already published a Lord of the Rings RPG roundabout when the movies came out. And they wanted Games Workshop to buy all of their backstock for their game. But Games Workshop didn't want to do that because they wanted to make a new game. So they weren't going to buy 10,000 books they didn't want to sell.
Yeah.
And so basically, like, because of all that, they could not sort the license out. And so for a few months, it seemed like I would get to do it. And then the whole deal fell apart and it didn't happen. So that was
Okay.
a professional regret.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. Christoph went back to our chainmail question. Any factions that you didn't have time for? Was there like a Wanti faction or any other special features that you would have loved to have gotten in that short time frame for chainmail?
ULT were going to be part of it. I can't remember if they were going to be a separate faction or not. Yeah, I don't quite remember, but yeah, we definitely wanted to have them. One of the problems, the way chainmail developed, is that there was an intention to do a world book, that would serve as just, background and stuff for the setting, and flesh a whole bunch of things out. The setting book just never happened. So basically, I wrote a series of articles for Dragon Magazine. I did one for each faction and then a few other ones. And that ended up being like the ultimate expression of the setting. Like, it never gelled into a book. We had been working on a core rule book just for the game. And even that was never actually printed. You can buy it now as a PDF, but when the game was active, the core rulebook didn't even come out.
Cool.
So yeah, it didn't develop the way that we wanted.
What is going on with Green Ronin Games now? What do you want to tell us about? What cool stuff's coming out?
We had been working on a core rulebook for Fantasy Age. So we just wrapped up the playtest for that. So that'll be next year at this point. One of the challenges of trying to run a game company during COVID was, a bunch of game stores like closed either temporarily or permanently, and the stuff that we could actually print was greatly reduced over what our plans had been. So now we have a kind of backlog of stuff. Sorry.
That's all right. Oh, it happens all the time. Trust me, I'm getting
Yeah.
them constantly too, Chris. It's okay.
Yep.
It's okay.
We live in that world
Oh
today.
man,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all
Let's see if
good.
I can mute this.
It's no problem. It's no problem.
Okay. God, what was I talking about? Fantasy Age? Oh yeah, COVID. Yeah. So yes, there's a bunch of stuff, that's like finished that can't actually even come out until next year at this point.
Wow.
So anyway, Fantasy Age has been running off of its basic rule book since that came out about 5 years ago, and the core rule book, basically expands out on that, and offers a bunch of new options, and it'll just be a great new starting place for the game. And we're also going to be using the Freeport setting alongside of that as well, and expanding that in some interesting ways.
Awesome.
So that's happening. We released a book for Mutants and Masterminds during quarantine called the Time Traveler's Handbook. And it's basically like how to do time travel shenanigans in your superhero game. I don't often write for Mutants and Masterminds, but I wrote for that book because Crystal, the developer, was like, oh, I think we should do like 1980s New York as one of the places that we feature, one of the times that you can go to. And I was like, well, shit, I lived in 1980s.
You knew exactly how it was.
Yeah.
I moved to New York at the height of the crack epidemic.
Yeah,
And
crack is whack.
so I wrote a whole chapter providing the Lower East Side, which was my stomping ground, as a setting for Mutants and Masterminds. So it involves, a whole bunch of my punk history and stuff like I got to put into that. So that was kind of fun. So yes, so that came out. Let's see, what else do we have going on? We're working on the 5th season role-playing game. That is licensed from N.K. Jemisin, her terrific Broken Earth trilogy. We're going to be crowdfunding that later this year. We released the Blue Rose Adventurer's Guide, which is basically if you like the Blue Rose setting but prefer the 5th edition rules, it's a book that lets you do that.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're actually going to be running a crowdfunder in just a few weeks to print that. We released it as a PDF and as print on demand a few months ago, but we want to do a more traditional print run and put it in stores and things like that. So we're going to be doing kind of a short, like 2-week Kickstarter for that. We also crowdfunded last year the Book of Fiends, which is a 5th edition update of our classic 3rd edition.
3.5 here. Yeah, I have
book.
this one right here.
Yeah.
3.5. Yeah.
So yeah, we got Rob Schwab, who was on the 5e design team, to do all the new stats for it, all new color arts. It's lovely. So we just gave the PDF of that to backers from the Game on Tabletop crowdfunder, because we're going to print it at the same time as the Blue Rose Adventurer's Guide. We're also going to offer that to during the Kickstarter for the Blue Rose Adventurer's Guide. So if you missed the Book of Fiends, you can get it in the upcoming crowdfunders. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Got a lot going on. That's fantastic.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask a little bit of a personal question. I saw you're on your website. You were talking a lot about Rush.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Same here. How many concerts?
I saw Rush, I guess twice.
Okay.
So basically, like before I got into punk rock, Rush was my favorite band.
Okay.
Like by a mile. And so
during the Tom Sawyer Spirit of Radio era, or
Yeah.
2112. Yeah.
Well, so basically, like I got into it like a lot of people my age when Moving Pictures came out.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I went back and picked up Fly By Night and 2112, Curse of Steel, all that stuff. And so, so that was really my era. Like all my favorite stuff is the 70s stuff, so I saw the Signals tour. That's the first time I saw them. So
82. I think because isn't Spirit Moving Pictures is 81, I think, and Signals is 82. It's the one right after. I think Grace Under Pressure is 83 or 84. Something like that.
So I saw the Signals tour. That was my first arena concert that I ever went to. So that was very exciting. And then I saw the Grace Under Pressure tour the following year.
Cool.
And then they got so into synths and stuff. I just wasn't really.
They talk about that in their documentary. Too much synth. Alex Leifens was not happy of all the synth that they were doing.
Well, who can blame him, right? But although punk really became the music of my heart, I always retained a soft spot for Rush, I still go back and listen to all the old 70s stuff, on a regular
Give me a
basis.
couple of the punk bands you're into.
How long do you have?
That's cool.
Wow.
I got into punk around about 1985. I went to see bands like Black Flag and the Meat Puppets and, local Boston bands like DYS and things like that. And then that just started this whole journey where, I went back to pre-punk stuff like, the Stooges and the MC5, New York Dolls, all that kind of stuff.
Oh my gosh.
The original New York stuff. So,
even Talking Heads were considered punk back in the 70s, right? Even the Talking Heads were early punk, they played at that bar with the Ramones all the time.
Yeah. The Talking Heads were a part of the scene at CBGB. And, So, the Ramones and television and all that stuff over in Australia, Radio Birdman and the Saints and the UK, the Clash and, all that stuff. And then, it was the mid 80s. So, I was really into hardcore, which was a subgenre of punk. So, I was into bands like the Dicks, the Big Boys, DOA, anarcho stuff,
Cool.
like Conflict and Crass and Flux of Pink Indians and just, on and on. A lot of stuff. Articles of Faith, great band.
That's awesome, man.
Mission of Burma,
Nice. It's nice to have that passion, along with the gaming.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would put punk rock jokes into my game material that nobody would ever get.
Oh, that's cool. You have to do that. You have to throw a little real life commentary in every now and then, a little zinger here and there, just to keep it interesting. I understand that completely.
In Vortex of Madness, there's a character in the City of Glass called Crocus Behemoth, and that was the stage. It was the stage name of the singer for Pere Ubu, who was a Cleveland band of the 70s. Yeah. So deep cuts, man.
Nice.
That's super cool.
I hope you enjoy, Chris. I know we're almost into 2 hours. I don't want to keep you too long. I wanted to say, man, thank you for this enlightening discussion. Really,
thank you.
It's been great. Anything you'd like to say to us in closing? The audience has been, been hitting that 140, 150 range. We got a lot of people on. They're very interested, asking a lot of questions tonight, and hopefully get a little bump up here. People will be interested in Green Ronin. I didn't deep delve into it as much as I'm glad I did. There's some fantastic content.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's been a long journey. It's weird. Like I sort of, I guess I should mention that I did a thing during quarantine called Curated Quarantine. And so on April 6th of 2020, I just had this idea that I would pick something from my game collection, take a picture of it, and then write a little something on Twitter and Facebook about the game. And I was I'm going to try to do this every day, for the length of the crisis, was my thinking at the time.
Yeah, and
I
then day 300.
So I thought that we might be talking about a few months, right? As like
Yeah.
the crisis.
Yep.
So I kept doing it, and then like as it went along, like the entries got longer and longer. So my first entry was on the D&D white box, and it was just a single tweet, like 280 characters. That was it. And then like I just started talking more about each game, and delving into the depths of my collection. Doing stuff as far back as H.G. Wells' Little Wars, which is like 1913. And then I started doing like nutty things like, oh, I know, like I'll try to tell the story of how miniatures games started in the 1950s by picking 10 games and trying to tell that story. And then like each of those entries was like 800 to 1,000 words. Which was kind of loony. But anyway,
Awesome.
So I did it for a year. And so finally, when it got to this year, I was like, okay, I'm spending so much time like reading games, and writing about games, and really not making any money off of this. like I should probably wrap it up. And by that point, it seemed like vaccines were about to happen. So I did it for a full year, and then April 6th, I did the final entry. So
Nice, very nice.
So where are these posts available now?
So if you went onto Twitter and checked the hashtag curated quarantine, they're all there.
Okay.
I also have a public photo album on my Facebook called Curated Quarantine, and it's all in there too.
Oh yeah, I read a few of them on Facebook, but I didn't know that was that long of a series. That's awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm considering options for like turning it into a book, because basically like there's an awful lot of game industry history in there. I'm like a historian by training, so it's sort of my impulse, was to write about like why games were important in a historical context, and that sort of stuff. Over Christmas period, I did the 10 days of D&D, and I picked like 10 D&D books and talked about what was interesting about them and things like that.
Awesome.
So, wow.
It was a whole thing.
All right, let's do some quickie shout outs and we'll do the giveaways here. Tim, when's your Barbarian campaign starting? And because I'm streaming it, so I need to know.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a set date yet, but
Okay,
I need to get some input from one or two of my other players.
Okay. So, Chris, Tim has a game it's set in the Rovers of the Barons. Barbarian. Nice. Yeah, it's
Barbarians only. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, and so he'll be DMing that for a new group of first levels. What are they called, Tim? What's the name of the group?
They're the underdogs.
Yeah.
More ways than one. So
yeah,
looking forward to that. All right. Well, we don't have a date yet. Probably in June we're going to start that up. Yep. Okay. Sounds good. Tim, thanks for coming on and asking those questions as well.
Well, thank you. I just had a couple, but I was just enthralled listening. It was like,
yeah, it's always good.
Great
Definitely.
See you.
Fantastic guest. So Anna, what do you got going on?
Well, I just finished the first version of the whole Earth planet map. So and I got a lot of praise and some well-deserved criticism. I thought it would be the other way around. So I'm very, very thankful for the Greyhawk community for not lynching me going into such a contentious topic, so to speak. So it's kind of interesting. And I have to remind everybody that was the first try. We need to polish it and work on it a bit, and people's minds need to be kind of settle a bit, and it will not be, I will not make a definitive version and say this is the planet, so to speak. It was basically meant as a sketch out so I can use it to place the flannies in the right spot on the globe. That was the initial, and then I was so carried away by doing it, so it was a lot of fun and doing it. So there will be a little bit of refined versions, and we'll see what we can do out of it, so to speak. So it is yeah, I already got bring back the Elvanian forest, so we have to see what we can do about that. So that there will be campaigning now for different parts of the planet that got overlooked and or something. So we'll see. But I'm going back to working on this year's biggest commission, because I'm treating it as a commission, and that's all the stuff that will be done for. I'm already halfway through it, so that will be done for D&D in a Castle in September. So since I'm going to run games for D&D in a Castle in September, so I'm going to prep for that, and that is, I treat it as a commission. So that all is going to be well mapped, and it's going to be set in Shieldlands, and it's going to be a kind of a 5-session campaign. But the adventure module is not something I will publish as an adventure module, but all the content that I produce for that game will be released afterwards, and including the maps. And I'm just now licensing some concept art for some unique monsters and stuff that will be part of that campaign. So I have a friend in Sweden that's going to do some monster art and some other cool stuff for it too. So that will be part of it too, and that will, I will see how much I will actually manage to map, but that will be some significant area. And we're talking several thousand square miles, hopefully, that I can have mapped at 5 feet per pixel to as a playground to play in. Yeah,
insane,
so
man.
it's kind of, and put in a few hundred locations and kind of cool. And the maps will come in a version with the locations, and they will come in a version without the locations. If you want to, I don't want a town there, or I don't want a village there, or something like that. So but it's part of the test run for a future generation of Greyhawk maps and other maps too. So it's the new technology. I'm working with the new cool tools that is not 20 years old. So it's getting there. So that's the big thing underway right now. And then, simply because I had that commission, I had to say no to another dream commission. I can't talk about it, but it's one of these damn things that sometimes you simply don't have the time when really, really, really cool things come. But it was supposed to be done by September, and there was no chance I would have done it. So unfortunately, but I have to say thank you to Ed Greenwood, who recommended me to do it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there are some things that you simply have to say no to that you would have loved to do. So I just say that I hope I get a chance to do something similar in the future. We'll see. But it's one of these things that I wish I'd have done, but no, it's not going to happen from me. So but they will find someone else, and I've recommended a few other cartographers that I think could do at least as good job as me. They can do probably better job than me doing it. So yeah.
Speaking of that, Anna, announce what is down the road for a new show that we're going to have.
Oh, yes, exactly. That's the other thing that working. Yeah, so Alyssa Faden, I think most of you who watch this are aware she's an awesome cartographer and a super cool character in herself. And she makes city maps and a whole bunch of other cool maps and stuff. And so Alyssa and me, we have been kind of playing around with the idea for some time that we wanted to do a cartography show, just like we have Legends and Lore that is kind of about the setting. We wanted to have a show on Twitch that was dedicated to fantasy cartography, and now we're going to make it happen. So and thanks to Jay for be the producer of this. So we haven't set a date yet that we're going to start it, but preparations are starting. So we're starting to plan for it, and so we hope that we can bring in some guests of the professional cartographers and others who work in the industry, and we're going to showcase products and have ideas and talk about styles and how you can use maps and basically all cool aspects of fantasy cartography is an idea to have a show about that. So that is coming, and Alyssa she's such a colorful character in herself. So I think it will be a lot of fun to work with her on this.
So stay tuned. We'll announce it as soon as we have the first date. You know, we'll get that up and going, and we'll have some fun with that too. All right, so. Oh, God. Yeah, it's going to be a blast. More
just
great.
Need to troll her by making fun of Romans.
Oh yes, yep.
So what's in store on here? Well, everyone knows our next show is Wednesday night, and it is the 100th Legends and Lore episode. So we got to 100 shows, believe it or not, on Legends and Lore. We'll have some special guests. We're going to go over the first 99 episodes and discuss them, some great moments and times. I'm working on getting that all set up and adding a couple new guests. to it. Unfortunately, Gary Julian's not available that night, but we have some other individuals that will be available. Carlos Lysing says he will be on already, so I got Carlos.
Good.
Carlos is
Thank you,
definitely
Carlos.
coming.
Yep.
Yeah. And Casey Brown from Living Greyhawk will be coming on. And that will be on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we finish up adventure number 911. I am scaring the crap out of my characters, and they go, Tony Winslow Brill has a really messed up mind to write this thing. It's right out of the book, right out of Candlekeep Adventures. I back converted it to old school and to Greyhawk, Xanthoria. It's nasty. It's super high level, and we're having a blast with it, and we'll finish that up on Thursday night along with Gamescape 3D STL giveaway as well. And then next week, we have another great guest, a true old school legend. I'm not sure, Chris, if you had worked with this gentleman or not, but Alan Hammock will be on next week.
Oh, no, I never worked with him, but
Yeah, Alan, you want to know about Ghost Tower of Inverness? I think he did A3 as well, right, and a lot of other content. So Alan will be on next week. We'll talk some old school with him. And then we do have a Saturday night special coming up with Stella's crew. I'm going to put that in chat there. Stella Luna, Lady May, Geek Life, Runaway Robot, and Time Lord's Wife will all be, I'll be DMing for them in 2 weeks. In fact, they were on the screen. We were prepping characters when Chris popped on first. And I was like, hey! So looking forward to that. It's going to be a blast, and that'll be another adventure I do on a Saturday night special. All right, let's do the giveaways, and then we'll raid into someone. I think I'm going to raid into the Nat 20 show tonight. We haven't raided into them. All right, so let me make sure I don't crash the stream here, Chris. I always do something wrong. Twitch, I always hit wrong buttons all the time here. All right, so entries are closed out here. Thank you. All right, first two winners are $25 gift certificates. The next three are 10. All right. If I don't have your email, Santa, let me reopen it for you. Try it again, Santa. Good to see you, Tabletop Santa. Try it again. I reopened it for you so you could get in on it. All right, go ahead. Exclamation point drawing. I think you just missed it. All right, and hit it once, exclamation drawing, and then we'll do it in. All right. There you go. You guys should be in already. So there you go. Okay. Thank you for the follow here. Closing it out. Yeah, lots of gifts. The $25 are courtesy of Cannibal Troy, and the 10s are courtesy of our great IT manager for Virtual Greyhawk Con coming up in October, Josh Pop, Zarathon. So here we go. First winner, 25. You got to be on to claim it. Note that. Von Moku. There you go. Michael Mossberger, you got it. You are also you were the winner of the Joust. That's how I know you so well during GaryCon. Gratz. Yep. I know he's on. I saw him on. Next winner, $25 gift certificate is Extort Derek. Extort 4711. Nice.
Oh, awesome. Congratulations.
Yep. Congrats, Extort. Okay. I may have both your emails, but we'll check that. Next three. Next winner, $10. Okay, we're on the 10s. $10. Death Ray in a Good Way. I think that's the second time in 2 weeks you've won, man. That's cool, man. Also, thank you so very much for all the shout outs you placed for me and a lot of people on Twitter. I saw that at the end of the week. Thank you so very much. Really appreciate that. Next $10 winner. Oh, don't crash on me now. Kai Brightwing. Congrats, Kai. And last one. These are all Green Running Yards. We all have a lot of fun getting some new things from here. Mattias. Congrats, Mattias. Mattias, who's doing a lot of work. He's also, I think Mattias and Wiley Hobbit are doing a Greyhawk podcast, I think. You know, they're doing a half-hour podcast coming up in Greyhawk. So, congrats, everyone. Whisper me your emails if I don't have them. I think I may have everyone's, but I'm not 100% sure. Once again, Chris, thank you so very much for coming on tonight. It was a blast. I learned so much. I learned so much, especially the stuff, there's my son, stuff on Marquesa and just the Earth Dragon and just all the other great content you provided to the community that a lot of people didn't know. Like, Dragon Age, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, wonderful, wonderful things. And if you, down in the road in the future, we have some Greyhawk Ask the Experts. If you ever want to join the group with that, I'd be more than happy to ask you to come back on for one of those really cool shows.
Awesome. Fun times.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, we're gonna raid into to Nat 20 show, everyone. All right, and thank you all. I'm gonna hit the wrong button here, like I normally do, and we'll see you Wednesday night for a memorable 100th Legends and Lore show with Anna, Mike, and myself, and some guests. See you all then. You can keep on chatting over here. Let me set the raid up, everyone.
We talk over the.
Oh yeah, talk over it all. Let me get that raid set up, and we'll raid into them. And thank you all for the support tonight. It was wonderful.
Thanks.
So much fun. Yeah, they always come up with new cool stuff. So we can definitely integrate and work on my.
Thank you.
My Earth Dragon for my campaign. That would
I love the Earth Dragon. I use the Earth Dragon a lot. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We'll see you Wednesday night. Let me just make sure the raid went in.
Yep, the raid went in. At least chat popped over, so.
All right, cool.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Chris.